Welcome back to AgriTalk at the Farm Progress Show, day number 2 here in Boone, Iowa, as we broadcast from the Syngenta exhibit. Good to see our good friend Chuck Foresman, Global Crop Protection Lead for Corn for Syngenta. But before we get to that, he is a Cub fan. How's this season going for you, Chuck?
Well, it's another rebuilding year. We're going to get there, though. And I want to ask you, how did the Cards do last night?
I thought you said last year. Last year, how did they do last year? Did they win something? I think they won the World Series last year.
They squeaked into the wild card, and they did well. It was a good team.
That worked out, didn't it? But yeah, last night was what I call a Cub night. You know, where things didn't go very well. All right, we'll move on. Let's talk. You and I talk a lot about weed resistance over the year.
Right.
What do we learn in a year like this, with a drought year like this?
Well, I think it just highlights how important it is that you put down pre-emergent residual herbicides on every acre. The way that the year turned out, those pre-emergent residual herbicides got enough moisture for activation, and those fields are clean. And I'm talking about both corn and soybeans. It's really important to get that pre down. And Syngenta's got a great lineup. Prefix in soybeans, boundary in soybeans, and then typically you follow that up with another compound, maybe Flexstar GT in soybeans or Halix GT in corn. So, you know, it's Lumax and Lexar pre-emergence. They are just outstanding herbicides. We use them on our farm, and they perform quite well. Got good moisture for activation, and took care of the water hemp, took care of the giant ragweed. And those are two weeds that we need to really be paying attention to, because you don't want to let them get away, because they'll really sap yield.
Another thing we were reminded of this year, you can have a drought, but you'll still have weeds.
Well, that's right. The weeds are going to figure out how to survive, and they're quite competitive to these crops. So it's important to get, you know, good quality seed out there. And of course, Syngenta's got great quality seed, corn and soybean. We have excellent seed treatments, and that really helps that crop get off to a good start. You know, more than 80% of the weed control that we get in any crop, it comes from the crop canopy. So it's important to get that crop off to a good start and growing before some of those weeds wake up.
You and I have talked over the years about the importance of addressing weed resistance. And there's been more focus on it certainly in recent years. What have we learned? Where are we at now in really identifying what the challenges are now?
Well, I think there's a great awareness in the general community about managing weeds, because once these weeds become resistant, they remember they're resistant. So you're going to have to deal with that for many, many years to come. That's a burden no grower wants to have to deal with. What we're learning is it's important to use diversity, use pre-emergent residuals, use post-emergent products. It's not unlike a baseball player standing up there and taking the first pitch. You know, if you take the first pitch, you're not putting down the pre. You know, don't take that first pitch. Our Cub players are learning that, okay? You know, we got players up there swinging at everything, but no. So put that pre down. Don't take that first pitch. Get it out there.
I guess the first part of this, we had to realize we had the resistance problem, and I think that realization has really set in now, and now farmers looking at how do we best address it. And you said the diversity of different approaches, you can't just rely on one way to do it.
No, that's right. And it's also cultural practices. We're not talking just chemical, we're talking culture as well. And it's important to be thinking about, you know, how we take care of the burn down. And it's also critical that we be able to continue to use atrazine on a lot of these acres, because atrazine provides great residual. It controls a lot of these resistant weeds, and it synergizes some of the chemistries out there that are so important to the corn grower.
Is there a more scrutinized product, a more analyzed and tested product out there than atrazine?
No, there isn't. And atrazine brings so many benefits. We did an analysis of atrazine benefits here recently, and we're showing that, for example, it's saving 28 million gallons of diesel every year. You know, we're producing 600 million more bushels of corn per year just because of atrazine. And these aren't numbers we just pull out of the air. These are careful analysis of data over years. So it's a hugely important product, particularly in this era where nobody's coming up with brand new herbicides, brand new modes of action. And that's what excites me about my new role. I get to interact with our chemists. I get to provide direction, and it's quite exciting. Syngenta comes up with new molecules nearly every day, and some of those never make it to market because they have problems. So it's difficult to come up with the chemical that you're going to be able to market and be useful for the long haul.
Going to be a lot of tough decisions made going into next spring, coming out of a drought year, especially if it stays dry through the fall and into the winter, and some critical decisions to be made, and some farmers might be wondering, where can do I cut back here, or what, because of what happened last year, what's important for them to keep in mind going into next year to get off to that good start in weed management?
Well, I think that first of all, they got to have their weed management plan set at least by the last quarter of this year. They need to know what they're going to do on a field-by-field basis. And some of the fields we've driven by here in Iowa, I see water hemp in these soybean fields. And if I were a grower, I'd be thinking about how am I going to control that next year in my corn, because they're likely going to rotate the corn. And that's where you put down Lumax. That's where you put down Lexar. Both of those compounds have 3 different modes of action that work on water hemp. So it's a triple that we're hitting there with that. And don't rely on a post-emergence system. Always put that pre down, and don't cut rates. I think that one of the reasons why we ended up having some resistance issues is because from time to time rates were cut. And when you allow survivors, you're throwing genetics into the next generation that can tolerate that herbicide. So, it's important to follow the label and be timely as possible.
As you've pointed out many times, getting off to that good start is critical. You can lose bushels right off the bat that you can't regain later.
Weeds sap moisture, and they take fertility out of the soil, and so it's really important to get that good, clean start. No farmer wants to drive by a field of corn that you can't tell the corn from the weeds. So it's really important to get that pre down. We have pretty good commodity prices right now. It costs a lot to put a crop in, and these herbicides that we have offer great value.
So bottom line is, don't be like the Cubs and wait till next year. Get started right now with your plan for next year, right?
Swing from the hills, man. Go at it.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Mike.
That's Chuck Foresman, Global Crop Protection Lead for corn for Syngenta. And again, our thanks to the folks at Syngenta for their hospitality here today, and of course for making our Farm Progress Show preview series possible again as we started in the spring and worked our way all the way through here to the show itself.